Welcome to the Campfire Project again and to our panel discussion. And today I have with me, first of all, Mark Evelinson from the Central Coast. Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, Mark. Erbsleben, it's a hard one because it's, don't blame me. I know
it's dyslexic. I've got a few of the...
No, it's only two in the world and it's difficult. Yeah, my name's Mark. I'm from the Central Coast. Married, been married 30 years, have 4 grandchildren and 2 daughters. I run 2 ministries. I run a ministry called You Choose for Change, which means that I go into schools and talk to young people about typical issues they face. And I teach scripture 2 days a week at a high school. Yeah.
Excellent.
That's basically me, yeah.
Fantastic. And then we have Mark Watts from South Australia.
We're going to have to do the Aussie thing here and give each other a nickname or something here, Alan, whether it's Herbsy and Watsy or something like that.
Yeah, that's good.
Look out.
That suits me, because if I got to say your full names, I'm going to be in trouble all the way through this.
Exactly right. Mark with a K or a C, look out. But yeah, as we said, so my name's Mark, and yeah, look, I'm my first value in life where I like to spend most of my time is with my 2 beautiful daughters, so nearing on 3 years old and 9 months old, and together with my beautiful partner Dallas. It's one of our least favourite topics is actually talking about ourselves, but I guess if we would label ourselves anything, it's kind of coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs, a bit of everything really, but predominantly supporting people to live holistically in all areas of their life. So whether that's through kinesiology, coaching, mindset work. Earlier, just before this started, we talked about my time spending time with the crazy Dutchman Wim Hof, doing things like ice baths and cold showers and so forth. So really about just getting back to our internal reference points and connecting with nature and just living a healthy, happy life and inspiring others to do so at the same time.
Excellent. And then we also have Kenny Mammarella-D'Cruz. Kenny, you're from the UK. Whereabouts in the UK?
I'm in London, and I've been around a bit. I'm an ex-refugee from Uganda. My family are from Goa, so I was brought up old-fashioned Portuguese. I started running groups when I lived in Sydney. I was brought up in a small town in South Wales, and we were the first non-white people. And I married an Italian, hence the double barrel. The Mammarella's the Italian part and the D'Cruz is the Portuguese part. So, and also I feel like I've been around in another way, in that wherever I've been, I was brought up a nice Catholic boy, my values, my model of life has been challenged. So I turned into Columbo, and everything for me is about looking for clues and understanding why. So I work with men privately, and I've been running men's groups for about 16 years now. And the media called me the Man Whisperer. Newsweek wrote a chapter in a book about me, and it was all about men's groups and the benefits of men's groups. Wow. And I'm not a father, so I'm the odd one out with that one, I think. But I do feel like with my work, I father a lot of men, and then I kind of like stop it because I don't want to be your father, so I want you next to me. But somehow that's the way it starts, it feels, which I think brings us strangely into the whole Gillette thing. And what really struck me about that is the way that, you know, there's the old thing, what a little girl's made of, sugar and spice and all things nice, and what a little boy's made of, and that's slugs and snails and puppy dogs' tails. And that's kind of where it starts. And I feel Gillette so picked up on that, of men are bad and men are abusers, and I'll show you how, because this is how you are, and then we'll show you how to put it right. And I think that's absolutely disgusting. It's patronizing, and it's better than the media used to be, because the media used to be men are just abusive and stupid. Now it's like men are abusive and we need to give them a chance and show them how to be better. So it was shocking to me, firstly, that they have the
Joining me today are 2 of the guys who pulled off the biggest Sokol hoax since,
there's a huge
the original
wave
Sokol
for
hoax.
change
Peter
and
Boghossian.
self-awareness, and how do I be a better man? And they jumped on that, basically, I feel, with the attitude of missionary, and belittling men and saying this is how to do it, which is for me an absolute betrayal of the old brand, where there was a father teaching his son how to shave. So why not build on the good that men are rather than demonize and then be the one that seems to be picking up the boy and stopping the lech and all that kind of stuff? Well, no, we're not like that. So give it a break.
That's right. Well, when you shared that with me, and that I thought, well, this is a great subject to talk about. And I looked at the video, and I had very mixed feelings about it. And I thought, okay, are they really trying to do something good, or are they just getting on the bandwagon? Is this just another marketing ploy, and a very bad one if that's the case? But Herbsy, when we were talking earlier on, you did a bit of research on this, and you went checking to see the stats.
24 million views, 1.1 million dislikes, 658 likes. And I suppose something that got me was, it said, I'm just quoting them now, something's changed, there's no going back. We believe the best in men. And I think that's what you've said, Kenny. I think you nailed it there, you know, what you said before. As if there's something wrong with us, and now there's no going back, and we're going to improve. And this ad sort of highlights that. Yeah. So extraordinary, but 1.1 million dislikes. So obviously it's put a few nails in a few people. So
yeah, it's quite incredible, the responses and that. There's been a lot of smaller videos, other people then reviewing it on their platforms, and there's been a mixture of comments and even some of the shows, and men and women actually fighting with each other. What were your views on it, Watsy?
Exactly what you were just alluding to is like the men and the women fighting is usually, to be honest, these things, they come up, and because by the nature of what we do is inspiring other people and so forth to what we do, we have social media accounts, and we see these things when they go viral and they come up. And to be honest, most of these things I run away from at about 1,000,000 miles an hour, because the first time I watched it, it's like, fantastic, just another thing to perpetuate the duality of things and keep people divided and separated. So my first objective look at it is, okay, is this something that is attempting to unify people, or it is something, again, to get people, at each other about this topic of, domestic abuse and violence and so forth, and that men experience it and women experience it and so forth. But is it just another avenue to perpetuate the duality and keep that paradigm running of keeping people separated and divided? And I think overall, the little commentary that I've seen it, people were divided over it rather than getting together and saying it was a good thing. So
see, I know that we had they talked about the Me Too hashtag that was out there, that revolution, to make it better for women. And there's a lady by the name of Bettina Ant, who's a psychologist here in Australia, who has been pushing for Men Too, because she's seen that it's swung the pendulum too far one way, and she wants to bring it back because she sees the men being abused. But with that, we've just gone from one fraction to another fraction. It's another division. You'll notice the hashtag I'm using everywhere is we together. And that we being everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're male, female, different religions, different cultures, different nationalities or anything else, different sexual preferences, etc. It's all we together. And until we bring it together, all we're going to do is having more fights. So people get heated about their arguments.
It sounds like the guys behind Gillette and this ad, they've sort of jumped on the bandwagon with the Me Too in that sense, and sort of rode with that. I don't know, I'm no expert in it, but that's what I'm reading, and that's what I'm getting from other people.
It was interesting to observe. Sorry, you go, Kenny. All good?
No, go on.
It was just interesting to observe too. In the one time that I watched it, one of the first things I noticed was very much, correct me if I'm wrong, what you guys saw, but the very blatant stereotyping of the different roles of like the who's good and who was bad in the acting roles within the ad too. So whether it be the colour of the child's hair or the colour of a person's skin and so forth, I thought there was some pretty distinct undertones of the roles that people played within the ad as well, which was a little disturbing to see as well for some subconscious seeding.
Yeah, well, it seemed to be more a focus back onto the white male. Being the perpetrator of everything.
I didn't notice that. I'll have to look at it again.
Yeah. Do you know, I don't know about over there, but over here, especially the young guys, the ones in their 20s who are dating and just getting to know themselves around women, the fear is shocking. They are so scared of being seen as abusers or as predators. And there's basically nowhere for them to put themselves. There's nowhere to meet women. There's nowhere for the merry dance of courting. That's just, a term like that just shows how old I am. But it's all about, you know, the playing of power and flirting and this and that, and it's fear. Especially the millennials. It's like one of the guys, the producer of the men's radio show, said to me, I dare not even look at a woman. I know that if we meet on an app and we've set the bound rules, then what I'm allowed to say, what I'm allowed to do. Otherwise, I don't even look at women in pubs and bars because I'm too scared, because they're all on the bandwagon. And I wonder whether the whole, you know, the Me Too thing, it feels like it's toxic femininity, because men go around fearful of the label, of the guilt, of being seen as an abuser, etc., etc. And for me, if I take it right back to childhood, I could say that as a child, toxic masculinity was basically bullies being shouted at, the very yang energy. You could say, as far as my father's concerned, toxic masculinity was the way he taught me the times table. There was no space to allow it to settle in my head. It was just shouting and bombarding because he knew it back to front and he couldn't see how anyone else couldn't get it. Where as a child, maybe toxic femininity would be my aunt saying, no, you're not going to climb the tree, are you? Because if you fall, then you'll hurt yourself and then I'll be really upset and I'll worry. Or when I got my little carpentry set, before I even heard my mother, grandmother or godmother saying, oh, be careful with that, I jumped in as a little boy saying, oh, don't worry, I'll be really careful with the chisel and I won't even use the saw. And that was basically as a reaction to toxic femininity, being responsible for their emotions, not wanting to be told off or abandoned, and being a good little boy. And my God, how many blokes come to men's groups because they've suffered from being responsible for the emotions of women, and they fear the abandonment, the humiliation, the guilt, and that type of abuse. I hate the way that toxic and masculinity go together. And saying that masculinity isn't necessarily men and femininity isn't necessarily women. This is about behavior that a lot of people are unconscious about, that can be unlearned, undone, and passed on differently.
Yes, if we had the word toxic behaviour, if that had been the phrase, I think everybody would be on side and they'd be standing shoulder to shoulder, regardless of colour, gender or anything.
Behavioural issue, that's right. Yeah.
Because it's one we all want to see change, but when it singles out, because I know that a lot of things I've been involved in the past with different groups and everything else, I'm accepted when I'm with them, but then I hear them whinging or complaining about, you know, my white skin or white skin or whatever, and I feel that I go, oh, I need to move away. So a lot of those people that I normally embrace and respect and everything else, all of a sudden I'm feeling I have to move away from, because I feel I'm being, you know, fingers are being pointed at me. So all of a sudden, where I didn't have any resentment before, and in fact I had a lot of love and affiliation for those groups, all of a sudden I'm going, no, I'll move back. Just like with women, as a massage therapist, I had a lot of terminally ill patients coming to me, and then I had a lot of women who'd been sexually abused. I'm a male, and I'm massaging them on the table. And here is a man treating them with a great deal of respect, which is something they hadn't had before. Now they got this, breaking their paradigms that all men are assholes. And they come back time and time again, and a couple of times, 3 different women had dropped their towels in front of me. I ended up closing my shop up altogether, simply because all I needed was one of them through rejection to make a complaint. And I'm gone, because I'd have no recourse.
The same fear, you know, when I'm teaching in a classroom situation, it only takes one person to say the wrong thing or something to be taken out of context. So it's a delicate position where I feel that as soon as the class is over, I've got to leave straight away. I certainly can't be left with a student within the... I can't imagine I used to do massage as well, and I can't imagine in our today's climate with what's going on, massaging another woman. It just takes one person to dislike you and say one thing and you're gone, you know what I mean? It's like you were saying before, Kenny. Men are afraid to look at women, you know what I mean? They're afraid to, how do I approach a woman to say that I like you? You know, how am I going to do that? Because it could be taken as sexual harassment. So.
Well, it seems like some of the groups I've been around, I've stepped in and, you know, a woman's coming close, so I've stepped back and they go, oh, don't you like women? And I'm going, no, it's really self-defense. And, you know, it's, you know, it takes women and men together and that to create families and everything else. It takes them to create a community. I love women, but I'm also very fearful of how things can be taken out of context if you just say the wrong thing. I've even given speeches at times or talks, and I've struggled to find the right word, and I've struggled so much that I've come out with a politically incorrect phrase, and I've been paranoid. I haven't been able to really concentrate on the rest of the talk simply because of how it's been taken, because we're so worried about being not seen as in the bad light, but we're not focusing on being in the good light.
It's like you said, Mark, too, you know, thriving together in community and relationships. You know, that should be really our focus. How do we thrive together as a community? How do we thrive in relationships? But now, because of, you know, the typical Gillette ad, it's saying that there's something wrong with men, and you can see this divide happening rather than coming together. Yeah, spot on there. So,
And just to add what you were saying there further too, Alan, you know, is playing that internal balance with your own internal work as to letting go those feelings of, you know, shame and guilt and judgment and ego of, oh, geez, if I say this, how am I going to be perceived? And, you know, dropping into that space of your own conviction, knowing that the message you've got to share with whatever you're speaking about between every breath and heartbeat of the day is coming from a place of authenticity and your own heart-centered place, but then knowing that we need to, I guess that we need to, as we shift into this conscious paradigm of, you know, more men sort of awakening to our, you know, who we truly are as men and women and beings and as a race, that we just need to allow others to go at the pace of grace and work these things out for themselves as well. So coming back to that, the reciprocal non-judgment and the non-blaming and shaming of people that might have a go or might, you know, accuse you of saying it a certain way. And yeah, I found that's been a tricky one for me to get to the place where just accepting people exactly where they're at and not judging them for being where they're at. So.
And I wonder whether this is part of the opportunity that this provides. So, for example, the guy that I mentioned earlier, he is willing to be public about this is where it leaves me, this is who I am, this is how it's affecting me. And this is how in front of a woman I now turn into a scared boy amongst women who are saying man up and meet me. Meanwhile, what is this man up thing? It's more toxic nonsense. And the number of men now who are stepping up to do case studies with me for the media to say, this is who I am, first and foremost. So they're showing themselves. This is how I was, which was a scared boy who was surviving rather than a conscious man who can live creatively. And this is how I did it. So it's an opportunity for men to realize where they are in the reactions and what they're stuck with and what they're fearful about, and to overcome that publicly, not just privately and secretly, it's publicly. And the mature man will not just share his tools, but will collaborate with other men and go, yeah, I have been through similar crap, and this is how it affected me. This is how I've undone it. And this is what I want to share with you, so you don't have to fall down the same hole. So I kind of like, maybe it's the Pollyanna syndrome, but come look for the silver lining, look for the opportunity in things and see how to turn it around. So in a way, good on them being the sacrificial lambs to screw up big time and bring this to our notice. And I hope they don't sell that many blades until they eat humble pie enough and they turn it around. But here's an opportunity for us to demonstrate who we are and how we are, the effects of toxic femininity and the effects of having to recover and prove ourselves that we're not abusers, and pass that on and live it in the world.
Yeah, because originally I had a lot of respect for Gillette, especially after having been flown to London with them a couple of years ago and speaking on their behalf and talking to their scientists and how they put everything together. But I thought this was a a PR disaster in the way in which they did it. Whatever advice they got was extremely poor. And to go there and just, separate people in this way, and as you just said, there were over 1 million dislikes and only 600,000 likes for it. It just shows that it's really upset a lot of people around the world. But as we said, this is affecting a lot of men. As we've talked about, the campfire itself was put together so that men could come together who were struggling with trying to figure out what it was to be a man. And then we've got something like this that we're still getting this term thrown at as man up. Well, how do we know what the word man up means? What is it?
Actually, they use this, what does personal best? We can be our personal best. It's pretty relative, How does somebody define what personal best is?
It's also telling us we're not good enough.
That's right. No, that's right. We're not, and they're putting us all in the same basket. So what happens is you have 1 million people and, 10 people stuff up, and next thing you know, we're in the same basket as the 10 people that stuff up. So it just puts we're sort of always on the guard,
When you look at with all the talk about the boys in there, about boys being boys as well, that I look at it and go, well, yeah, boys are boys. They're not cars. They're not dinosaurs. They're not tractors. They're boys. What are they trying to say with that? So I know there's a meaning behind it, but the literal understanding of it to a child who is a boy, and they're seeing that a boy is a bad thing.
Yeah.
What are we doing to our youth?
It's the same old bad boy, good girl. It's as simple as that. And I think, wasn't there a study where the sex of the child was mixed up, and they noticed that the boys were treated as if they were a problem by the caretakers, and the girls wouldn't be a problem. They needed to be protected. And this is just society. And to an extent, if there is truth in it, that boys can be unruly because we have testosterone running through us, etc. It's like, what's up with having male and female hormones? Then deal with it. This is power, creative energy, pushing for boundaries, natural, normal growing up. And boys don't need to be controlled by humiliation.
Yeah, and that's in the ad. If you notice in the ad, the two kids wrestling, and I think that's where it says boys will be boys. Well, that's right.
Yeah.
Boys do, don't they, wrestle? They're making out like something's wrong. And it's not testosterone, but it comes back to a behavioural issue. You know what I mean? It's all
what
about
was the expressions on their face at the time? From what I could see, there was a smile on there.
They're having fun.
So they're actually having fun and playing.
Yeah.
And it was an extension of the fathers, like who and what is supposed to be the problem here? Is it the father who wants his son to beat the other father's son, so he's the top dog and the other boy's humiliated? And very often, it is an issue that men can live their unexpressed personal power or childhood through their sons, and make that an issue that's real and can be worked with, rather than boys are all violent, men just want to be the cool one and compete. It's so old-fashioned, and it's so easy to demonize the men that way. And as far as the man up's concerned, I would say manning up is exactly what we're doing now, because we are manning up and talking about it rather than cowering fearfully and trying to stay out of trouble and not to be seen as the label that people are putting out there. So it's up to us to take it on board and turn it around publicly, I'd say. But yeah, absolutely shocking. I was on the radio recently talking about experiences of toxic masculinity. And the example I used was a woman that I worked for who was a right bully. I launched an arts and entertainment news agency for her. She wasn't listening. She was threatening. She wasn't even paying people on time. And it was just such a toxic environment, and it was bullying. And it was a woman with masculine energy used in the negative. Yeah. And it was quite a shock. It's like, wait a minute, you mean women can do it too? I wouldn't say that I'm all man. I'm part woman. And I can be toxic in the negative, and I can be toxic in the positive. And I believe the same goes for everyone.
That's it. Well, as I say, we've all got masculine and feminine energy in us, and it depends on whether we're using the positive or the negative aspect of all of that. because, you know, as a father raising 3 boys myself, I realised I had to, you know, become more of a nurturer and take that side, which wasn't the way I was brought up, or, you know, all the talk about being a man at that stage, being the father.
Yeah.
So I had to take on that role. So, and where I actually modelled that from were the women that I had around me. So we need the women, we need the men, but we need everybody in the right aspect and take away this toxic masculinity, toxic femininity, and turn it into, well, we need to do something about this toxic behaviour.
Yeah.
Because then only then we can stand shoulder to shoulder with each other and look at the real problem. Because at the moment, we're just taking sides. Because I'm sure a few people who've listened to this may hear some of what we've said and go, oh, are they against women? Or are they against this or against that? The end result is, knowing the discussion, what we're trying to do is understand where it all is and then find out, well, how do we actually then change this? How do we come together as a community, men and women together?
Yeah, I suppose in any culture you're going to have the good and the bad, and unfortunately the news, you know, with what's been happening, I suppose throughout the world, and the Me Too, and just a lot of, I suppose a lot of the media is really focused on that particular point of that men are like this and women are like this, and that's created this toxic environment now where it seems like they've been, you know, people are really divided on the issue, and that men have to change. Just this, we've been thrashed with media, so all men are toxic and all men are treating women badly, and now we're copying it. And now out of that, I suppose we become fearful. I don't feel fearful. I'm married. I don't look at women anyway, but you know what I mean? I can just imagine if you're 20 years of age or you're going through adolescence, you're fearful of how do I actually approach someone. It's absolute madness, and it really comes down to a behavioural issue. What we've got to do is bring our children up and teach them a benchmark and teach them a certain degree of morality and what that looks like. I suppose we'll have different values, and that's ultimately the key. The key is about a moral issue and how we bring our children up, how we treat each other. You know, that's strive together.
Yeah, well, I speak to a lot of young fellas, and I hear that all the time, and you know, because I'm able to read the people, I know that these young men are quite good men, but they all have the same thing they're telling me. They can't find a woman when they go to the pubs or places like that. Nobody talks to them. But the ones that the women are talking to are the guys who are more aggressive, but are probably the ones they shouldn't be hanging around in the first place. Because they have the confidence. They're not worried about what anybody says. And that's what I thought would come from this ad, is more people who are in the right quarter, feeling more threatened than they ever were before. But the ones who are the perpetrators, they don't care. They're not watching the ad. They're not taking any notice of it.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's actually just creating greater separation between the good men and the bad ones.
I wonder whether this is where toxic social media comes into it, because I wonder how many people, rather than the truth, it's more, how can I build my numbers? What do I need to say? Which position do I need to take? Who do I need to jump in bed with and get in cahoots with in order to be more popular, more powerful, get more likes, get more dopamine hits, etc., etc. So toxic social media is, I will be whoever you want me to be and say whatever you want me to say and use the hashtag, so I'm popular, I'm safe, and I'm the flavour of the month. There was a press release that was sent out, and it was, what was it? How to pick up women in the Me Too area, in these times of Me Too. And the journalist put it up on his Twitter. So it was sent by my people to the media, because it was dealing with pickup artists, the PUA thing, which is a huge community that needs addressing, and it was Me Too. So kind of reasonable, not the language I'd usually use, but kind of reasonable to meet these people. Before even getting published, an editor stuck it up because there was a huge, how can you say pick up? That's disgusting. And anyone but the hashtag Me Too will get a lot of attention. And within 3 hours, I got a lot of attention on someone else's Twitter because of those words, not even reading what the article's about, but it's like, great, now we can all jump on the bandwagon. And I was devastated. Like yeah, totally. And as I was devastated, I reached out to a couple of people. One of them was Fernando, who was behind the whole Lynx ad, which went from spray your armpits and get laid to what type of a man are you? So it went from the unconscious, horny male to the conscious man with choice. And Fernando had a lot to say about the Gillette thing and the position they took. But his response to me was, you've landed. Because if you're not being hated, if you're not part of somehow this frenzy that's going on, then you're not on the map. And I'm thinking, so in order to be part of what's going on and have an influence for good, I need to accept that I'm going to be hated and I need to join this frenzy. Apparently it seems that way. But it's like, I'm a sensitive soul. I didn't want to play that game. I'm trying to play clean and be authentic and be vulnerable, not one of the vultures who's just desperate for fame and hopefully fortune is the way things go. I'm not quite sure how social media works, but next to me in a interview was a very, very well-liked Twitter woman. And her thing is about people talking about their dating experiences. And there are huge threads about how to find a sugar daddy, how to play your sugar daddy, how to make money out of your sugar daddy. And she was next to me on a BBC radio show who didn't seem to care about the content of her fame, but it was more, this woman has thousands and thousands of likes, therefore she's an expert in dating, therefore we want to hear from her. And it's like, what am I doing here? What is going on? Is this what I'm colluding with? And if so, then is it for the good or am I some sort of a sellout? It's so confusing. And it's not just media and pointing the finger at media. I think it's like the new fame is the social media influencers who are generally snakes, in my judgment.
Yeah, it's good.
You guys got any comments on that?
Yeah, no, there's a lot in there.
I think picking up what was coming up for me there, it's interesting, like, to observe through that exact conversation or that exact comment that you've just had, Kenny, is that, you know, having the compassion and empathy for people that are in that state, because I've been that man in the past myself, and I've been the guy that's been, you know, the Australian rules footy playing bloke that's going out and picking women up in bars, drinking alcohol, that then led into plenty of, you know, one night stands and then eventually a meaningless material marriage and so forth, because I was so far disconnected from my own internal truth. Through the system, through the paradigm, through what was my perception of what I thought everyone else needed me to be without actually having my own internal truth and reference points, because I'd never worked out a way to create them for myself or to actually recognize exactly what they are. And then, you know, as your own evolution passes and you end up either, you know, everyone, a mentor that I work with, you know, has a process that we all go through, either suffering or inspiration. So, you know, we can suffer to the point where we effectively, sorry for the swear, we hit the fuck it point. And we either, you know, turn in a 180 and go the other direction, which is exactly what I did. But then it just depends on how that manifests in all aspects of your life, depending on which way you go. So some people might continue to go down the other way until they get the appropriate they either go to the appropriate suffering where they end up unwell or sick or whatever. So whatever you're connected to that you believe is the intelligence, whether it's God or spirit or creator or whatever that is having some form of influence within your reality, that you find there's a connection, and that connection comes within, and that once you actually connect back to that and get back to living in your natural state, free of all the programming and free of all the bullshit, that these distractions that, you know, now I'm raising 2 young girls, and we were just talking before the talk actually started about our girls maybe get half an hour to an hour maybe of screen time a week to watch some educational stuff on YouTube, and the rest of the time it's, It's out there in nature. We're hitting the beach. We're learning to ride. My oldest daughter is not even 3 yet, and she can ride a pedal bike, you know. So we're doing these things to develop her neural integration, her senses, and all these things completely distracted from this world. Eventually, yes, we know that there's going to be a time where none of this comes from protecting these girls, but it's purely just guiding them to be in their natural state as long as possible before, you know, they end up with all these distractions that all of a sudden at 6 years old they see an Instagram model's account and work out that they need to have a flat tummy and a six-pack and big boobs and so forth. And all of a sudden that starts impacting, you know, one of the first things that I do working with my clients is teach them breath work. And you see so many people have such inappropriate responses to life purely through the way that they breathe. And so much of that comes from this programming, this stereotypical that blokes need to have a, you know, rock hard six-pack and women need to have a big bum, tight abs and a booty. And all of a sudden you get all these people that are breathing up in the energy centers up here that keep them in grief and fear and anxiety and so forth. And as soon as you get them to breathe below their belly where all's good, you know, life changes in literally it can be in a breath or a heartbeat. So yeah, it's interesting, you know, for me, for going through that turn of circle, but now having the inspiration to, we've every single one of us in this talk has talked about inspiring the next generation. It's not about, you know, every one of us has grown up either being partially our father's son or our mother's son or our father's daughter or mother's daughter at some point until we grow into our own sovereignty and our own being and our own sense of who we truly are. And it's coming back to, you know, that we don't own our children, we don't control them, and the best thing we can do is undo as many and remove as many of these programs as possible to allow our kids to thrive in their natural state and find their own place in the world.
That's it. And I know that well, one of the sayings I heard some time ago, and I really loved it, was the fact that as parents we are not sculptors or carpenters. It's not our job to turn the kids into something that we believe they should be. We're gardeners, and our job is to nurture them so they can be the best version of themselves. And that means spending some time with them.
It's great, Mark, that you came to that place where there was a turnaround. You know, you did a 180-degree turn where you got, you know, something happened in your life where you went in a different direction, whereas so many people don't get to that place. The reality is the culture that we live in, and this is what I find from, you know, working in ministry, but the culture that we live in today, our children are being shaped by so many external influences. And as you were saying, Kenny, I just lost my train of thought, but as you were saying before, these external influences are performance-based. You know, I've got to perform. You know, you look at Instagram, you look at Facebook, you know, the amount of likes that they get. I've got to perform. I've got to accomplish stuff. And they're trying to define themselves, but they're defining themselves from external factors rather than something internal. And I suppose, Mark, you're saying it comes from being with nature and finding out who you are. I'd sort of see it from maybe a Christian perspective, but what we're doing is we're trying to define ourselves by everyone else rather than saying, no, this is who I truly am. And so that's why, as you've met, and obviously in what you do, Kenny, you've met people that it's just all about the performance. It's all about, you know, it's narcissistic.
Narcissistic, exactly.
Yeah, they're just me, and then it doesn't matter what actually, there's no line in the sand, there's no benchmark. They don't need it as long as they're getting, you know, look at Twitter, for instance. Twitter is really designed to get a reaction, you know, if you, and so the more worse things that you can say, the better it's going to be because you're going to get heaps more people following you. And that's unfortunately the culture that we live in. And I'm a pessimist. I think it's getting worse. I can't, unless you go back to nature, Mark, and unless our children, unless parents really start to reflect on the world and the culture around them, because what we do is we become so entrapped. What is that? That's not really the right word. What we do is we become so busy with life, we don't really see the things that are shaping our children, and then it's too late. And what you've done is you've moved your children in some ways from a society, and they're going to be better for it as long as you're a realist and teach your children, look, when you leave here and you haven't got the protection, or we're not always going to be your role model, and as long as they're aware of what the world is really like, then they're going to do great. You know, I've been to schools where kids have been with very Christian schools where I feel that it's been very negative, where these kids have no reality of what the real world is. And so the parents have sort of, it's like that bird, if you hold it too tight, it'll die. If you hold it too loose, it'll fly away, you know, that sort of thing. And what's happened is these kids, you just know that as soon as they're let free, it's going to be worse for them because their natural nature is going to take over. So it's that balance of trying to say, okay, I live in this environment and all these things are shaping my children. What do I need to do to ensure that they're aware of it? You know, give them knowledge as far as what goes on. It's just really sad. Kenny, you nailed it. It's performance-based. There's no benchmark. We don't care about morality. It's just about, I want to be seen. I want to be liked. I need the likes. I need to be famous. And look, and that Me Too movement is authentic, but there are a lot of, I would say, I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but there are a lot of people that will get on the bandwagon with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. People will do that. They'll jump on it to go with a particular thing, and that's because that's how they get noticed as well. As you said, you took a conscious choice and you took that positive direction. And as Kenny, you were saying that those people who are getting those likes, and really it's the wrong word for it because quite often it's not really a liking of them. It's
exactly
an approval rating. That's how they govern themselves on how they actually get their value.
Yeah.
So they make a conscious choice as well, but they make a different one altogether.
And I think Gillette's done that. I think Gillette's taken a social issue and used it to their advantage, thinking that it's going to somehow work for them. I've got this really annoyed me. I've got to read this to you. It says, this is from an article that I read, this call for self-examination, now attached to the dull, unavoidable and very personal daily ritual of shaving, is making a lot of men uncomfortable. But it is precisely this kind of confrontation, introspection, is that the right word, that is needed if any real change can take place. So people are getting on the bandwagon and say, yes, men need to reflect. When they're shaving, they need to look at the way that they are as human.
Look at yourself.
I'm going to join you. I'm going to grow my beard back, I think.
I was going to say the Dollar Beard Club could absolutely clean up here and just start a campaign about the conscious male grow a beard.
It even goes on to say, yeah, go on, sorry.
I was just going to jump back to when you were a lad or a bad boy, and the jock that got all the one-night stands and stuff. Would you say in any way that you were abusive, or were there women who wanted to play the same game that you were playing? Because generally it seems like boys are bad and they steal this thing from poor unsuspecting women, where I'm not sure that's true. So how was it, and how is it these days, talking about that behavior in those days? Because I don't see it as bad. I see it as a phase that you were going through and something quite normal. But tell me your experience.
Yeah, look, in my experience, reflecting on it, it was probably the least fulfilling and hollow years of my life. You know, like I went from being an elite athlete, sort of in my late teens, early 20s, and everyone else around me was starting to do their partying and so forth. And then I kind of did my catching up in between, like in through my mid-20s. And my experience was that it was definitely a two-way thing. You know, like there was people out, males and females out there to party and have a good time, and everything was always reciprocal and most oftenly, you know, alcohol fueled and exactly. And look, it's interesting being involved in a football club. I was probably on the last, where I live anyway, here in Adelaide, Australia. I would say I was probably on the last wave of where the football culture was, you just get together with the boys, have a few beers, and you go out for a palmy and a bite to eat, and then you hit the town, and then you might switch to spirits at midnight because you had a guts full of beer. And whereas it was interesting to observe towards the end of me playing football, like all the under-18s coming through and then talking about what drugs they were going to get for the night and that whole, you know, the mixture between all the different cocktails and things, but then observing that in the females as well, in that, you know, females through security, this is probably a whole nother topic of conversation, but you know, I found that the young females were all switching to taking drugs through the fear of being taken advantage of under the influence of alcohol. They felt they were more present and so forth, taking drugs. And then the boys were doing the same. They were mixing. All these young kids are coming, talking. They just finished a game of Aussie Rules football and talking about what pills they're going to get, a bag of Coke, whatever it was. Like, what? How did this just creep into society so quickly? And so I found then going out in those circles, like then the whole me getting a little bit maybe older in that spectrum, and then the younger ones, that you had this massive wave of like and conglomerate of like people acting in so many different ways, all in different altered states. So I think the altered state culture of things has a massive part to play with all that as well. And look, as soon as you take the responsibility of putting something in your mouth or in your body, it's up to you as to what happens, you know. Like, but
was it reciprocal? Was it like you found that the girls were just the same as the guys?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, both ways, you know. Like sometimes I'd go out. It's like, you know, I think tonight's probably, I might get lucky tonight. You know, you'd have those thoughts going through your head, but then all of a sudden I'd be out. All I want to be doing is just having a chat to the boys after a game, and I had some good-looking blokes around me and whatever, and you'd attract the attention of the girls, you know. So it was sort of,
it works both ways.
Yeah,
but
that was
apparently the blokes are supposed to be the predators, and the women are supposed to be the poor innocent victims. Right? That's not fair. And the way that you said something, I don't remember exactly what you said, but it's the women would feel less vulnerable. Same for blokes. It's exactly the same for blokes. It's like, I just want to go out and have a good time and not be hassled and not be stalked and not have some woman throw herself at me and ask me if I'm gay, if I'm not interested in her, and so forth and so forth. But, you know, it's the same on both sides. And I have, well, here's an incident. I was on the Docklands Light Railway in London, minding my own business on a hot summer's day in shorts and T-shirts. On come, I think it was about 7 or 8 girls. I can't really call them women. That wouldn't be fair. They were young. They weren't wearing that much. They were going for a night on the town. I was just minding my own business, standing up. And before I know it, 2 of them are rubbing themselves all over me, hands all over the place. And apparently I should take that as really cool because I must be really attractive or something, and how great that I'm getting all this female attention. On the other hand, if it was the other way around, there would be big trouble. It was shocking. I was a cheap piece of meat and something to laugh at or fun. And, you know, I don't take it as I was so attractive that they wanted me. Absolute nonsense. I was a cheap piece of meat for them to have a giggle with, and that's as simple as that. And it's allowed one way around, and we're supposed to take it as normal or a compliment or, you know, look at me, boys, I'm the one they want. Absolute nonsense.
I copped my fair share of bum grabs and crotch grabs back in the day in nightclubs. Not a problem, you know, and it's... Yeah.
Exactly. And was it nice? Or was it something you had to collude with in order to just kind of like let it pass?
It's interesting because that opens up a whole nother thing, doesn't it? But yeah, definitely. If you're enjoying having a beer and all of a sudden, you know, you get a bit of a frontal crotch grab, it's very unpleasant. You know, like I mean, yeah, I was cheeky enough, I guess, pardon the pun. You know, maybe if you did get a pinch on the bum or something like that as a bit of attention. I'm a pretty easygoing sort of person, you know. I don't take things to even back in those days. Nothing really got to me. But yeah, absolutely. And on the reverse, if you were to pinch a girl's bum on a dance floor or something like that, you know, I mean, I'm talking now 15 years ago, you know. So like, I don't know if anyone does that anymore, but probably not because of the fear of the repercussions of what might turn around. And look, I saw that back in the day. You'd either, you know, it would be taken in jest as something funny, or the bloke, if it was a bloke that did it, he might cop a smack in the face. You know? Like it's, yeah. I mean,
and if you didn't collude in a situation like that after you were groped, then what would be your position, and how would your mates or the women respond to you standing up for yourself? How would it have gone, would you say?
It's interesting because I think everyone would react differently in that instance. So I mean, in the instances that it would have happened to me, you know, my response probably would have been, "You're right there, love," and probably walked off to the bar and got another beer. But that's probably where it was. But yeah, I think by my nature and, you know, the fact that I probably spent a long time living as my mother's son and my father's son, and was raised in a relatively respectful home and had good values and morals, regardless of being out and amongst that sort of behaviour, that regardless of whether it was a beer or 10 beers, that, you know, whether you're male or female, everyone still deserves to be, you treated with the respect and the humility that that people deserve to be. So I think one for me, it was never confrontational. I don't recall ever having any major confrontational events within a pub or a nightclub over that sort of thing. So, and look, let's face it, it wasn't every Saturday night that you go out and get crotch grabbed either, but there was times that it would happen. But having said that, you know, you definitely saw guys and girls overstepping the mark and displaying inappropriate behaviour. And now that I've got to this point in my life where I just see that the whole lot, it's not about a male-female issue, it's just behavioural issues that people are conditioned to, that they can't break through the program. So,
yeah, I think the Gillette ad is unfortunate that it was actually come out, but at the same time, from the positive side of it, it's getting us talking. It's got a lot of people, and it's showing the division that's out there, and it's also showing the number of people from the dislikes that you showed there earlier on, Nebsy, that there are a lot of people who are against it and going, hey, this is not the norm. We're all being blamed with the same, or labelled with the same brush, when it's not the full situation that exists. But the whole thing is, it's highlighting the fact that there's so much confusion as well. You know, with the things that happened to you when you were young, Lottie, that was a case of, well, how did you handle it? It would have been, you know, the people around you, there have been a lot of different things that would affect how you would do it one night as opposed to doing it another night. But when we're looking at all these kids that are coming through now that are so confused, and we're trying to help these boys into manhood, how can we go about helping them around, you know, showing that, yes, Gillette and all the rest of it, that stuff exists, but how do you now show these boys and that how to actually find the right way into manhood?
And I really feel that the truth is, what Gillette portray is, yes, some men are like that. And then there's us in this room around this fire now. And some men are like this. And my, I guess, in a strange way, mission, for want of a better term, is to show men as this is an option. And the media show the nonsense that kind of get them likes. I would love for the work that we do to also be seen as this is a normal option. This is a conscious male. So it's me too. This is the type of man I am. And this is the way I express myself in the world. And these are the mistakes I made. And this is how I made an absolute arse of myself. And this is how I have abused, consciously or unconsciously. And this is how I have been abused, consciously and unconsciously. And this is how I've turned it around. And that's valuable, because I can't say that there aren't men like that. There are, but they're not in my world. And I love the way that my bubble is a wonderful bubble that seems to be growing. And Gillette has given, I would say, me, us, an opportunity to allow this bubble to grow more and more, saying, yeah, sure, that goes on. That's not the mainstream. And that's glamorizing nonsense. So what do we want to grow? And let's give that energy, rather than Gillette showing this is what we want to go, so let's feed it and let's jump on the bandwagon. So an opportunity surely to demonstrate and give energy to what we want to grow rather than what we want to go. And there are a lot of people like that, I'm sure, and that's fine. So great that we can turn it around and say, well, yeah, so if that's where your community's stuck, and it might be a bit strange for you to be the one to start to turn it around and not be like that, but now you can see it and maybe take a step in living that into reality. And what I love about the men's groups, for example, is people come from impossible situations and communities where they don't want to rock the boat with the people they do sports with and drink with and whatever it is they do, because these are the only communities they have, and they'd rather be part of that than lose it. But at least they can come to the groups and experiment with who they are and who they no longer need to be. And once they've practiced that and got some feedback and confidence, that's going to slowly be taken into their communities. Or maybe they'll say, hey guys, check this out, and they'll bring it into their communities in a more courageous way. But either way, I can't blame blokes or women for colluding for fear of exclusion or for fear of being humiliated or abandoned or whatever it is. That's life. But here's an opportunity to say, let's make that world a bit bigger. Let's have a little bit more choice. Let's take some more risks and not collude with trash, and really put out what needs to grow.
Yeah, because if I look at my world and that, I just look at the men that I've interviewed so far in this panel, including you guys, it's been over 30 men, and every last one of them I've respected. They've been great people. Their backgrounds, where they've come from, what they're trying to do, they are model citizens. And so that's my community. I know the others exist, and I don't like being put into the other category just because I'm a male. So
one of the what I found is, obviously through that, living that world and then shifting into the world I live in now, there's obviously a transition time and how that happens. I went through, I probably found that the most toxic mates that I had in the group were the first ones to fall away. And then, if I wind back from where I was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, there's not a lot of those friendship circles that I have anything to do with any of them anymore, apart from the once or twice a year catch up. They're always sometimes never rule, when it comes to the people in the circle of influence that you have. And then all of a sudden, I did some work with Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he talks about when you go through life change and so forth, and you kind of put your foot in the river of change, and then it gets a little bit turbulent for quite a while, and then all of a sudden, you got to find that internal strength and power to commit to, obviously, the changes you wish to see within your own world, and sometimes that that means everything else around you falls away before your new tribe turns up, and then the empowering people around you turn up into your life, and that can, we get it. I mean, I get it. I've been there, and I get that it can be lonely. I get that, you want to hang on to certain behaviors or certain friends or certain mates and so forth, but ultimately it comes back to connecting truly, honestly, with your heart of hearts, and saying, is this serving me for my highest good? And anything that's not, it's black or white, it's got to go. And that river of change is, I think, what most people find the hardest, is that they spend that time going, you know what, I'm just going to separate myself from that a while, but then all of a sudden they get the text message, let's go out for a beer, let's do whatever we do. But I mean, I've gone full circle to the point where now, it's like, there's not a chemical in my house. I don't drink anymore. I'm full plant-based diet. Like, it's just so far from what my reality was. And most people, and people go, oh, I couldn't do what you've done. And if you asked me 6 years ago, I would have said the same thing, but it's...
I find it tragic how many men come to me and what they're really saying is, how do I do me better? And the fear that they have of betraying their family, losing their friends, whatever it is. And the answer is always, it's got nothing to do with your doing, because that's handing power to the outside, and it's coming from, am I safe? Am I going to be accepted? Am I going to be humiliated? And it's everything to do with exactly what you seem to have done from what you're saying, which is your being, getting in alignment with yourself, and whoever falls away, and whoever is attracted is attracted. But at least there's space for you to be you, self-respecting, self-aware, true to yourself, and the world around you. It sounds like it's changed, and I've found this in my own life, and I found it in the lives of the men around me, is as they get in alignment with themselves, then everything around them will support them. That's the way nature seems to work. And the younger guys need to see this demonstrated. Gillette did an absolutely shocking job of trying to demonstrate this by making themselves the saviors and humiliating men. It's basic. Everyone knows the word misogyny. How many people even know the word misandry? It's just ridiculous. But I think the intention was there for the wrong reasons, and they botched it up because it was for the wrong reasons. But the way that we live our lives and the stuff that we're passing on, I mean, you go into schools, for example, and it feels to me that this is exactly the kind of stuff you pass on to give them permission, whether it's in alignment with where they've come from or beyond where they've come from, to be themselves and live a good life. this is exactly the stuff that needs to be passed on. It's not as sexy as men are bad, let's sell something. But this is the truth, and this is the opportunity.
Right. Yeah, very good.
And Herbsy, what's your comments on what advice would you give to the young fellas?
Oh, what you mean, going into a school?
No, we're going, looking at this toxic masculinity and everything else. As we've already seen, it's a matter of choice as to which way you want to go. And as you've been saying, Kenny, it's finding those people around you, and that the right people will come around. Well, go searching for them as well.
Yeah, I suppose the advice, I go into Christian schools or independent schools, so I have a Christian worldview that I bring. But one of the important things is that I allow young people to make up their own minds. But as far as when it comes to change, I make them very aware of what external influences are out there that are trying to mold you and shape you. Because a lot of young people are ignorant of those things, you know what I mean? And as people are going through adolescence, there are hormonal changes. And as you've said, Kenny, plenty of times, there's toxic media out there, and they're being shaped by that to be a particular type of person. So I think a lot of young people are confused about what it means to be a man, or confused to be, in some ways, what it means to be a woman. So what happens is there's a lot of confusion out there. So I don't go in there and say, well, this is what you should be like. But what I do is make them aware of the things that are happening around them. And ultimately it comes down to, and I think you said that as well, Kenny and Mark, about being yourself. Now I look at it from a Christian perspective, that we're made in Christ's image, and what that looks like, So, that's how I approach it anyway. Just making young people aware of what's out there, and they've ultimately got to make their own decisions when it comes to that.
Yeah, give them all the information and let them make that decision, but it's guiding them, it's not telling them.
No, absolutely, that's right. Again, you're in a Christian, even though in a Christian school, you've got probably 60% non-Christian and 40% Christian. So you've got to be able to bridge that gap with the non-Christians there and the Christians. So it's a matter of communicating the right way.
Yeah. So one of the things I'll be doing in the near future will be starting to interview the women as well. So as I said, my whole focus is we together. It's forget about them or us and that sort of rubbish. It's how do we all get together. So I'm going to love hearing some of the women's comments, especially when I get them together and start interviewing them and find out how they believe that we can actually work together as well. Because I think that's going to be valuable information for us as well. Because I don't think we're moving ahead until we start, instead of separating and saying, well, that's a problem over there or it's them over there, but we get together and say, no, it's we together. We're the ones who've got to find the solution, and the way to do it, we're going to bring the community together. We have to do it from a together point in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's probably a good place to finish off today. I really appreciate all three of you coming along today and sharing your views. And thanks for the suggestion about this, the Gillette, Kenny, because I thought it's been a great conversation. And for
cutting edge.
I never thought we'd talk about, but it was great. Yeah.
There we go. Here are the three Aussies over here, and the Pommy's got to show us how to do it all. That's really good. That's great. Thanks very much.
I've really, really enjoyed meeting all of you and hanging out like this. It's been rich. Thank you so much.
Excellent. That's what we're trying to do with this whole thing, is get you guys talking to each other outside the campfire as well. The only way we turn into a global community is everybody chatting together and having these conversations and sharing our views is really brilliant.
Tell you what, Mark, thanks to you, I'm going to start cold showers now, mate. I'm going to try and have a go tonight, have a cold shower for 30 seconds or something.
Yes, get on board, mate. Just
watch my breathing.
If you want inspiring for the cold, just you type into YouTube Wim Hof Vice, the Vice magazine. Check him out. He's a crazy Austrian, and once you do 7 days of it, you never go back.
And anybody who's come in late on this and that, the cold showers are probably not what you think they're talking about.
No, it was all for health. And Kenny, it's wonderful meeting you too, and seeing what you do with men. It's what a great thing that you do. Opening the doors for people to come and speak to you. Wonderful. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, guys. And for everybody who's listening in today, send your questions through to these guys. Get into conversations. If you haven't seen the individual interviews I've done with each of them, you'll find it in the announcement there that says a big thanks. Go through the list, find their interviews and check them out. And to you guys, thanks for being here today, and to everybody else who's been watching in, thank you for coming along.
Cool. Bye. Thank you so much, everyone.